look who I just found, Matt Allen AM, no less. Best we get him in the captain's chair here on Bulwarks and Bulldust and get into it. Well, welcome to season 3 of Bulwarks and Bulldust. We're delighted to be back in the Captain's Lounge at our spiritual home here at the Boatworks in Coomera. Little bit special today. Matt Allen AM is in the Captain's chair. And Matt, thank you very much for making the time and doing it on a public holiday, but not for New South Wales, only for the Gold Coast. Really great to have you here.
Yeah, no, terrific to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. You'd be a busy man at the moment, I think. We've got Brisbane 32 coming up. But any announcements as currently with respect to sailing program and location? I note that you said earlier that they've just announced Los Angeles. It's 2025 and Los Angeles is at 2028. So does that mean you've got till 2029 before you make a decision?
Oh, definitely not. We won't wait that long. But it's interesting, you know, the backdrop of what's really happened over, especially with Marseille and Paris. There really wasn't very much wind, as I think a lot of people would have realised in Marseille. And when the wind did come in, it was very hard to schedule the racing because you had a booked time slot with the Olympic broadcast service, and then there was no wind, and then the wind comes in, and then you need to get another slot with the broadcast. And then that takes a little while to organise. And then by the time they got that organised, sometimes the wind had evaporated again. So it really, I think, created an issue where it sounds really obvious to say, but you actually need good winds to run a good regatta. And if you're doing the Olympics, you need a good wind for the sailors and you need a fair competition. And I think with Manly, which is the original location, you look at the wind data for Manly, you've got to understand that we're trying to do an Olympic Games, a Summer Games, in the absolute middle of winter. Now that's great for virtually every sport, but it does create problems for sailing and to get proper winds. And I think Manly, for those people, you know, that run a lot of regattas at that sort of midwinter time, often not very successfully, you either get 3 knots or 30 knots, and there's not a whole lot of the in-between. So that's why I think we're looking at different locations, and there's obviously quite a few different locations in the mix. I think the one thing that you can say is we need one location. To split the regatta in 2 or move it midweek would be very difficult, very expensive for all the competing nations, and very expensive. You'd have to have 2 international juries, for example.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're talking Manly, Queensland too.
Manly, Queensland,
Manly, New South Wales.
Not anyone listening. No.
Yes.
So it is the games will be held, I think, with a couple of small exceptions in Queensland. I mean, there will be some football in Melbourne and Sydney. They're the 2 other Olympic cities, and I think that's a nice thing to share football. But I think the rest of the Olympics will be in Queensland.
So there's been a little bit of commentary perhaps around Townsville and up in the Whitsundays, but nothing confirmed yet?
No.
Misinformation at the moment?
There's certainly no decisions been made. There's still studies of, where could we possibly go? Townsville, I think, would be certainly one option. There's obviously a couple of locations in the Whitsundays, Airlie Beach, Hamilton Island. I think it's really important to, one, regionalise the games a little bit, to bring the whole of Queensland in, but also to showcase, the beautiful Queensland that is outside sort of the Gold Coast, Brisbane and the Sunshine Coast. I mean, the Whitsundays, whatever we do, will need to be showcased. Townsville's a fantastic location as well. So we've got to work out where do we put sailing, but also then separately, maybe outside of sailing, how do we showcase those other areas?
Yeah. So what sort of, obviously the decisions fundamentally on, having breeze, weather, good conditions for sailing, but where does the spectator part of it fall in, or infrastructure fall in the decision-making process?
Look, it's very important. You need to have access for people to be able to physically view the events, whether that be on the water or on land, or a combination of the two. You want to have, obviously, the ability to have an athlete's village and all the security side. This is Olympic Games. Security is incredibly important. Australia might be one of the safest countries in the world, but we still need security. And I think for the Games, we're looking at about 20,000 security guards that need to be employed for the Games, or thereabouts.
That's huge.
Anyway.
Yeah, so how big, just from an event perspective, so how many boats are we talking? How many Olympians are we talking? It's huge, obviously, but have you got some numbers that you could throw at us?
Yeah, some numbers are pretty much determined and some aren't. So, and this is quite interesting because we'll end up, I think, with 10,500 athletes across all sports. Los Angeles is almost 1,000 more than that. But the 10,500 is the IOC cap. That is to keep the expenses down, the athlete villages, etc. LA has gone higher than that because they introduced cricket as well as some other sports that bumped up the numbers. But I think Brisbane will go back to 10,500. So some sports, and could be an issue for sailing, could get an athlete quota cut for Brisbane with 10 medals. So then you get to a point where if you decrease the number of athletes too far, then you create issues with being able to produce 10 medals. And that's something that World Sailing is working on at the moment. How do they then change the classes and roll out their recommendations for Brisbane?
Has there been recommendations based on classes for Brisbane as yet?
No. Some of that work's being done behind the scenes. And that decision will be formally made in November next year.
Right.
But, the manoeuvring is happening now, and the work, importantly, the work is being done now to make sure that we can actually change sailing at the Olympic Games. And what I mean by that is that when we run the World Championships and we have a traditional yachting point score, we need to be changing that for the Olympic Games. World Championships is sailors. It's not a huge media event normally. But when we go to the Olympic Games, we've got to understand that we're going to the IOC's Olympic Games, and we need to make it more friendly for people who aren't sailors to watch. I think the best example is that why does the person in the middle race that comes fifth get the gold medal? Now, we can try and explain that, but we actually haven't been able to explain that to the general public. And so we need to change the format, possibly change the classes as well, to create something that is way more interesting to watch on TV. Because at the end of the day, sailing, it's important, in my view, for sailing to remain strong in the Olympic Games. And for that to occur, we need to dramatically increase the TV appeal of sailing at the Olympic Games, and not just tweaking it to dramatically increase the appeal.
You think circuits like SailGP and what's been going on with the America's Cup, do you think that helps or hinders you? It makes the gap bigger?
Look, I think there's a lot of learnings out of SailGP, especially. And I think the thing about SailGP is it does attract non-sailors to watch it. And I think that's irrefutable. And so World Sailing has had a lot of discussions with SailGP. I think SailGP, we need to take those learnings from SailGP, apply them to some degree, with changes, obviously, and make it just more appealing to people outside of sailing.
Well, to your point before, SailGP, you can go through the whole regatta with a bunch of consistent results, just scrape into the end, and then you can win the regatta having performed at a mediocre is the wrong word, at a less consistent level. And like you say, where we get to in the Olympics is it's still your cumulative score.
So I think I think the good news is that, you know, and I've been saying this at World Sailing for some years, you know, we've got to think about it differently. I think people now at World Sailing get that and relate to it. And what that actually means in terms of format changes, I guess time will tell. But my job is to make sure that sailing is strong in a media sense at the Olympic Games. And, you know, we need to make changes, big changes, to ensure that that happens. I mean, I'd hate to think that sailing gets, you know, massive athlete quota cut, then that would lead to perhaps less than 10 medals. So I'd hate to see that. And so we've got to try really hard and work hard to, you know, change the appeal. And, you know, last race for many classes, I think the last race, the winner takes all, is where we'll have to end up there.
Yeah, yeah. I've been out of the loop. Is there much change in the classes for the next Olympic cycle?
No, not really very many changes between Marseille and Los Angeles. And so there will be some format changes and some tweaking. So the wholesale change, in my view, has got to come from, you know, Los Angeles to Brisbane. But the media numbers by then will be in for Los Angeles. So Los Angeles is also important. But there's flexibility in terms of format changes, less so for classes.
This is a quick ad break. And we're back.
I guess, Matt, the big question would have to be that a long time ago we started talking about the overnight scenario, fill up the coverage with wonderful stuff coming out from on board, the two-handed. Now that the two-handed has been so successful, we're about to have yet another world championship with the 20 boats and a round robin affair for, 30 crews, roughly, give or take. Do we think that possibly the offshore two-handed gold medal might indeed be back into the fray?
Look, I'd love to see it, back into the fray. I think from Brisbane 32's perspective, it's too complicated. There's too many moving parts. I mean, they are trying to simplify the games, get to the point where they can actually deliver the games. And I think the games in Brisbane will be fantastic, but the delivery, it's a long way away, but there's a lot to deliver. Obviously, TV is going to change between now and 32. We talked about the number of security guards. Obviously, the venues need, there's a lot of construction work to be done. There's plenty of time to construct those venues, but construction of big venues, does take longer than it did, say, when we were doing Sydney. So there's a lot of challenges, and I think the view is that we can produce a lot of TV content for when Brisbane's asleep and the rest of the world's awake. It'll be replay, but there's a lot of content. There's no shortage of content. And that offshore event, or I was going to call it the sailing marathon event, and I'd dearly love to showcase it or deliver it, but I just don't think the politics are there in a world sailing sense so much, but also the IOC and Brisbane 32. It's keep the game simple, make sure it's deliverable, and so I think that's probably going to be put on the back burner, unfortunately.
Reach too far.
I think so, yeah.
You must have a large and very experienced team around you, and feel free to shout out to any of the good people that you're working with.
There's a lot of good people. I really enjoy working with the Australian Olympic Committee. I mean, we've terrific people there. We've got a terrific group of people in the executive. Ian Chesterman, the president, and Mark Abib, the CEO. Great people to work with, but also Evelyn Halls, the other vice president. There's 2 vice presidents, myself and Evelyn. But the whole team at the Australian Olympic Committee are great, and it's fantastic for me to actually then work with World Sailing with that IOC, AOC hat, because the AOC is a subcommittee of the IOC, and I'm the only person that really has that dual role within sailing. So it's a good fun role, especially as we get closer to Brisbane 32.
Yeah. Do you interface with sort of all levels of government as well, or does another body take on that role?
So Brisbane 32 is responsible for delivering the games, and obviously we work closely with Brisbane 32, and Ian Chesterman and John Coates, sit on the board of Brisbane 32. So we're very much lockstep. This Australian Olympic Committee is actually about delivering the teams to the games, winter, summer, as well as the other games that we get involved in.
Well, I guess that it's as if that wasn't enough work. Then there's also the role at World Sailing as the chair of the Offshore Committee, the Oceanic Committee, and we've had many, many conversations over the journey there, and the deliverables with Siobhan and Stan being the last one. It's been fantastic to really lock down the potential for issues to not be reported correctly and so forth, and to simplify it. But it's a really big job in the Oceanic Committee. I know there have been some additional developments since we've been talking about the changes to reporting. Did you want to walk through some of the things that are going on inside the Oceanic Committee and therefore World Sailing itself?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things worth noting. I mean, on the safety reporting, we've totally changed that, which is terrific. And so now we've got a very much standard format for safety reporting, because if we're making decisions about regulating the sport, and we don't want to over-regulate the sport, but now we're actually getting the proper information. We've also got a group that I sit on with a safety commission that looks across all the safety aspects, not only offshore, but inshore, dinghies, everything. So now we've got a proper focus and a proper reporting system that I think enables us to make better decisions. And there's obviously a push in some areas for more regulation. I mean, that's, I guess, the world that we live in. And I think we've got to be very careful about not over-regulating the sport. So there's certainly areas where particular races or particular classes need specific regulations. There's certainly plenty of examples and plenty of Cat 2 races where people are trying to say, oh, well, we need to have 3 reef mainsails and trysails and everything on board. And I go, well, sometimes you're doing a Cat 2 race down to Flinders Islet and you start at 9 o'clock in the morning, and in a big boat, you'll be back by 6 o'clock in the afternoon. So we don't need to over-regulate that. But if you're doing a Cat 2 race like the Fastnet race, or say, Melbourne to Hobart or something like that, then put that in the notice of race. But don't regulate the whole sport, because for some races you need specific things. And there's lots of examples of that where organising authorities, yacht clubs, have to then put that into the notice of race and take their own considerations about what they need. A good example is the Rolex Sydney to Hobart race. There's obviously a large number of very specific things that are there for that race that don't need to be in a Cat 1 race somewhere else in the world. So that's very important for us, I think, as a sport, to make sure we don't overcomplicate the sport, but also we're very careful about looking at what accidents have occurred, what can we do to enable the sport to then learn, grow, and be safer, but not burden everyone with undue regulation.
Well, I guess the other really important thing that I've noticed in the journey on working through things with you is actually about making world sailing faster and more adaptable and not as cumbersome. And probably that's accelerated in the last 3 or maybe 4 years, much more than the 10 or so before that you and I have been talking about these things. That speed and development is actually really kind of exciting, even though there's a lot of work that's gone in behind that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's interesting because looking at the regulations, the offshore special regulations, we work very closely with James Dadd, who's the chair of the Special Regulations Subcommittee. And those recommendations then come to Oceanic and Offshore for final approval. So the Board of World Sailing doesn't get involved we just tell them what we've decided. So it's very important that the offshore special regulations are actually approved by offshore sailors. It doesn't go to a bunch of people who don't know anything about offshore. So we've got our own control of what we do and our own destiny. But we've also got the sport changes a lot. I mean, the Sydney 38 or the Far 40 is still the same boat as it was 25, 30 years ago. But obviously, there's a lot of really high-performance boats. And I guess the challenge we've got going forward is, how do we regulate the boat from 30 years ago or 40 years ago, as well as some of the really high-performance boats? And we're obviously just going to see more and more of that occur. And some of that goes back to the comment I made. If you're sailing a really high-performance boat and you think you need additional safety features on the boat, feel free to do it. We want to give everyone a baseline of safety and regulations. And if you think you need more, well, you can do more. You can do whatever you want. The AIS was a good example, some years ago. Now everyone carries AIS on in terms of the personal beacons. But a lot of people put that on the high-performance boats as soon as it was available. And now it's regulatory.
Best asset to get you is the one you've just left.
Yeah, exactly. Best chance.
Well, having just used one recently, I'm actually a big fan. So right on board with the POV AIS routine. Yeah, I'm right up for it.
We hope to never use one, but if we do,
I've had a go. So
yeah, it's exactly. And technology, is obviously going to continue to afford us better solutions in some areas. But it's as I said, it's a baseline, and then people, whether they be the organising authority or the skipper or the owner of the boat, can then lift the standard from there.
This is a quick ad break. And we're back.
Yeah, obviously, you've had a multitude of different projects through the sailing world. I've been lucky enough to be a part of a couple of Ichiban teams, and thanks for that. But obviously, the Indian was the second time around always part of the plan, or is it unfinished business?
We probably always thought that Comanche would be a 1 year plus 1 year project. You know, have a bit of fun the first year. Obviously, it wasn't very successful going to Hobart when the main fell to pieces. But James and I sat down after it, and we basically just said, "Let's do it again. Let's do it one more time." I could probably say one more, no more, but it's just going to be. Boxing Day, 1 o'clock on Boxing Day, with 6 high-tech Super Maxis on the start line. It'll be, I think it's fair to say, the best fleet of Super Maxis to assemble anywhere at any time in the history of sailing.
Absolutely fact.
And how we're going to fit 6 of them on Sydney Harbour, I'm not quite sure, but we'll have to work that out. But it's just going to be exhilarating.
Pretty cool for the race organisers to get that fleet, and on their 80th birthday, I believe.
Yeah, and I think it really captures the imagination of the general public. The yachties, we all love the Sydney to Hobart. Some of us are more addicted than others to the race.
32 down or something.
I like the way Bill Barry Cotter did it last year, quite frankly.
No, I know. Maybe next year that might be something more cruisy. I don't know. We'll see. But I think, we're talking about the Olympics going into, getting the general public involved in sailing. That's what the Rolex Sydney Hobart Race is so good at. The fact that it is often front page news in the newspapers. Everyone in Australia loves the Sydney to Hobart, and it's really the viewing numbers, from the rest of the world, especially North America and Europe. It's huge. It's a huge race in the Northern Hemisphere. There's probably not that much else to do. They're over, they're just getting over Christmas, only just. In the time zone, and it's pretty cold outside, but it has a huge appeal in the Northern Hemisphere. And obviously every Australian, just loves the race.
I guess the question is, if the weather's right, how good's it going to be to try and smash the 4.5 minutes out the heads trick? That's it hasn't been beaten. She hasn't even beaten her own record.
Was that her first year?
Yeah.
Is that the one where Rico looked under the boom and went?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. Said blah, 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 big fella. That one. What a buzz. What a buzz.
Yeah, I guess we don't really think about getting out of the harbour in record time. To get the race record, that would be something special.
Yeah.
But I guess our aim is to just get out of the harbour, and not have any issues. And I think there'll have to be a bit of that with so many boats on the start line, and Sydney Harbour's constrained. It's only that big, and Sydney Harbour's a lot smaller for Comanche than it is for the Sydney 38 type boats because of the shallow water. There's a lot of places on Sydney Harbour we can't go, and that just creates a bit more havoc.
And then you've got 6 of them, so there's not a lot of room to start with, and it just got a lot smaller with 6 of them, and most of them, only a couple of the older ones are skinny. Most of them are pretty wide.
Yeah,
big shoulders.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be, we probably should all put heart monitors on that.
Yeah, could be part of the footage.
Blood pressure, heart monitors, and see how we go. But
speaking of wide, that's probably a little bit of an unfair nickname, wasn't it? Anyway, wasn't it? Was it land? Was it aircraft carrier or back in the day?
It does feel like a bit like an aircraft carrier when you're on board, until you tip it over at 30 degrees. Then it feels like a yacht, but when you get on the dock, it is. Yeah, the funny thing is, when I go back to my 60-footer and you go back on and you go, gee, it's small, and they go, Matt, a 60-footer's not small. I go, well, it's all relative. Like, it feels really small. Anyway, it's a fantastic boat to sail, and it's exciting, and it's going to be, I think, fantastic for the race, for the 80th edition, to have that great fleet of Super Maxis, and hopefully the rest of the fleet, strengthens a bit as well. Time will tell when we see the close of entries.
Yes, well, I think that's right. But for you, of course, you've won it yourself, multiple occasions for that matter. But the first win goes back to the great and late King Louis on board Challenge, no less. What a boat, what a guy. How is it in your own mind when you think that you've been doing it for so long, you've won it, and the grand prize of the Lion Honours win is still there? It didn't happen last year, but we'll see how we go. Best of luck for it. No pressure. What kind of a feeling is it when you look back and you go, I won it on my own, won it as the boat captain, actually, for Louis, when you think about it? What a set of memories. What a set of memories.
Yeah, look, just fantastic memories. And I think as a 22-year-old or 21-year-old sailing with Lou Abrahams, and we did the Admiral's Cup, we did a couple of Kenwood Clipper Cups at that time as well, and in a couple of different boats, and just meeting and sailing with a number of people and venturing the world with Louis. Louis and I became really close. We'd often sail on Saturdays and then with all the guys, and then often we'd have lunch on just the two of us on Sundays, and then talk about, okay, what are we going to do, and just progress the yachting plans. And it was fantastic. We sailed with people like Bernie Case, Jock Sturrock, the list goes on, Col Anderson, Wayne Dixon, the Melbourne Rat, who was a great character up the bow, and Brandon Kibbe, and we just had some fantastic people. We all got along really well. We were all like brothers in arms, and it was just that camaraderie. And we pushed the boat, and we had the success in '83 where we sort of had to win the race twice, and it was just fantastic when we came in, and all the reporters said all the other boats are parked, in Storm Bay, no wind at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and we'd finished, and by the time all the journos had come down, Louis had probably 3 or 4 drinks and couldn't string a sentence together. So I became the sort of the media star because I was still cleaning up the boat, so I hadn't had a drink yet. So
it's a pretty different world these days, though. You don't have, we've got such up-to-date information every minute. We essentially know when we come across the line whether we've won or lost, and those days.
Yeah, very different.
Totally different days. But yeah, great experience, great boats, great campaigns, and a whole different era of sailing. I mean, we built not the first, but certainly one of the, probably second or third carbon fibre racing yachts in Challenge 3, designed by Herman Freres. And Herman came out, and we started building it with Toby Richardson, the puppy dog in Melbourne. And we looked at the drawings, and where are the engineering drawings? For a carbon fibre boat, we barely knew what carbon fibre looked like, let alone anything else. And he said, "Oh, you guys will work it out. No structural plans, and it's just a whole different era of sailing, and you sort of make it up as you went along a bit." But it was a lot of fun and some great memories.
This is a quick ad break. And we're back.
I guess it's really interesting because, you know, your dedication to racing is phenomenal. I remember speaking with you, must be about, is it 6 years ago now, when, you know, you're sitting there and literally if you had a fishing rod on board, you would have been able to cast for the mark and wind yourself in to drag over. I know from our conversations just how infuriating that was, given you'd sailed the pants off it to get to there, and then you're literally just going, well, that's it, it's done. The joys, the range of joys and despair in yachting definitely sets you up for life, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And I think it's part of the fascination of the Rolex Sydney Hobart races. You get that, I mean, it can happen in Storm Bay, it can happen in the Derwent. You know, it can go for you, it can go against you. I remember one year we were in the dock in the Volvo 70 and a Frizzle Freeman came up and said, there'll be no wind on the East Coast tonight for those little boats. He was wrong. There was plenty of wind, and Love and War won, you know, its third victory. And so you just never know. You can be on both sides of the equation, and you've just got to roll with it. And it's, you know, it's part of the fascination. It's probably why you keep coming back. Let's roll the dice one more time.
Not many people who haven't been there understand how difficult hard charging is. And of course, last year was utterly brutal on equipment and people.
Yeah.
And God bless them, of course. Hard charging is really difficult, and in a really fast boat, you know you've only probably got a number of jibes in you. You literally have to calculate those down and go, you know, you don't even get the same number as a cat. You probably got maybe 5 jibes in it. Really difficult to plan for. Really difficult if you're the one with the wheel. Talk us through hard charging and just that constant and relentless pressure, a lot of water over the deck. You're talking about doing 25 to 30 knots with a lot of breeze and often a very confused sea state off the east coast of Australia, or Tasmania for that matter.
Yeah, I think it's really hard conditions on the people, on the boats, you know, and obviously, you know, the tragedy that occurred, you know, last year, and, you know, it's obviously something that, you know, would, you know, as much as we can do for sailing, we don't ever want to see that occur, and, you know, very much that our thoughts go with the families, and you know that's something that we really don't want to see in sailing. But I think it's a really big management exercise to jibe any boat in those conditions, and the Comanche jibe is very complicated. Any of the big boats that have the furling sails, because you want to jibe going fast, and so the challenge is, how do you jibe going fast and furl the sail? Because you've really got to furl the sail 90% probably before you jibe. So you have to make that a pretty slick operation to keep the apparent wind down, and that's hard. That's hard to get it all in motion. You know, the rest of the jibe can be quite easy, but to actually go into it doing 20-something knots and have the sail furled is really hard work. And that's what created some problems for us. And we'd replaced a number of the battens, but the batten that we had, one batten that hadn't been replaced, we didn't have time to do it. And that shattered in the jibe. It was the last jibe. and then that just tore the mainsail. It was as simple as that. And it was, you know, it's unfortunate, but that's sailing, and people roll around and, you know, get back on the horse for this year. But it's, you know, very difficult conditions, and quite unusual conditions where you have that amount of breeze from the north. I haven't really seen that amount, apart from perhaps very short periods of time. So anyway, this year will be different weather conditions, I'm sure.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you know, it's been known to serve everything up. And then, of course, you were actually tasked with going to assist. And in a boat as wide as Comanche, that's raises yet another set of problems. You know, everyone talks about how Col drove Challenge up to get skipper because he'd been used to taking Acrospire up to a floating mooring. But it's another thing with something like Comanche, and I know that we've had a conversation elsewhere about actually then prepping the crew for retrieval. Might sound easy, but it's completely the opposite.
No, nothing's easy at that time. You're in the middle of the night, quite windy still. We had our swimmer ready to go. Sammy Newton was going to go in. He was getting kitted up. Luckily, when we got quite close, they'd retrieved the crew member. We also had a paramedic on board. So we're thinking, okay, so if they've retrieved the crew member and he's injured and needs a paramedic, how do we get the paramedic onto the other boat safely? That's a whole other exercise. We didn't quite get to the point of having to do that, but that was starting to run through my mind. Okay, how are we going to do that? Are we going to launch one of the 2 life rafts? That was an option, but we never actually got to that point of making the decision. Fortunately, he was retrieved. He was in good shape, and then we headed back to Sydney with our tail between our legs.
Well, yeah, look, I'm sure it was a very difficult time for everyone, and especially with Lufter Leach disappearing. Never a good time. Never a good time. So if you think about it, you've been out enjoying the 60 on Sydney Harbour. You're in 30 knots the other day, charging around. Obviously enjoying the racing, obviously enjoying the sailing. This is a really good time. But of course, you're one of those special breeds of yachties that's also got a powerboat.
Indeed.
And not just any powerboat. So did you want to sort of talk to us a little bit about the fact that there are a group of yachties that go for a gentleman's express? You can obviously mooch around.
Yeah.
There's an idea. There's the boat. You can obviously mooch around in the PB, but you've also got the ability to pin its ears and have a wow of a time.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed powerboating. My father had a powerboat, and that's where I first went on the water with him on his powerboat before I took up sailing. And my first dinghy was a mirror dinghy called Mooch-along, and it was after my father's father, my grandfather's, after one of his horses, and he died before I was born, so I unfortunately never got to meet him. So it's after Mooch-along. It's named after the horse in reverence of my grandfather. But I love going out in the Palm Beach and Rico having his first ever ocean race. We did it together on a boat called Die Hard, 1984, and it was the Gladstone to Hamilton Island race. Going up to the first Hamilton Island regatta in 1984, and we, I don't know, picked him off the beach or something. I think he was sailing a Hobie Cat or something. Can't quite remember. And we were a bit short of crew, and it was sort of, we had a couple of good people, but we were really short. So we're just grabbing anyone we could. And so he joined us and then did the rest of Hamilton Island regatta with us. So Rico and I go back to 1984, and I always wanted to buy a Palm Beach. And I said, I need a bigger one. And one day he rolled out the plans. He said, I'm building one for Bob Oatley. And I said, okay, that looks like the right size for me with 4 children. And we pretty much signed on the dotted line within like a few days. And he was building the boat. I think he'd actually half built the boat before I signed. But anyway, that's another story. But it's been a fantastic boat. And now 15 years old. And it's just terrific.
Well, and proving how huge your heart is, you were actually really, really generous to Coco, the nephew, and provided Mooch-along for his wedding. And I might get shot for using that story by either of you, but it does show how generous you are with your time and everything. And I know that they absolutely adored having Mooch-along for the wedding, and what a spectacle.
Yeah, it was a fantastic day. And I only just looked at the photographs again the other day. And you have so many great times in the boat, but that was really, really special.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I guess it's been a very long story, as you would expect with somebody who's been around boats for so long, and a very wide range of topics. Matt Allen, thank you so much for sitting in the captain's chair by Melfi Designs here at the Boatworks. Really, really great. Please come back and see us again very, very soon.
Oh, I'd love to. No, I really enjoyed the chat and look forward to coming back. And what a great facility here. It's just sensational.
Thank you, Matt, and good luck with the lead up to 32, Brisbane.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. And thanks to everyone for tuning in again to Bulwarks and Bulldust. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, comment, come to us with any feedback you've got, any questions you might have. We're really happy to go back to any of our guests with follow-up questions. We'll catch you next time on Bulwarks and Bulldust.
Matt Allen, unbelievable as always. Such an enjoyable time. Thank you for being on Bulwarks and Bulldust.
Oh, a pleasure. Pleasure to be with you guys and talk about a lot of subjects, and hopefully we'll do it again soon. There's plenty to talk about.
Please come back.
Love to.
Matt Allen, everyone. What a star.